There is a real stereotype of what narcissistic personality is, which coincides with what we know in the literature as a grandiose description of narcissism, which is not the only description that we have. And the grandiose description usually talks about people with exaggerated sense of self-importance, a sense of entitlement, that are bold, that are rude, that are aggressive in their approach to others, that are inconsiderate, they lack sensitivity, and quite aggressive in terms of their approach. And that many times that's the stereotype that I suspect was somewhat supported by the way in which pathological narcissism is defined in DSM, which is the only definition that we have in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Psychiatry. That's not the only way in which pathological narcissism expresses itself. And today we know that this is only tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of people that are suffering from what we call pathological narcissism. They do not really fit this definition, which is many ways caricature and actually is a disservice to understanding people with pathological narcissism. It's actually quite shaming. In fact, many times when we do talk about this diagnosis with patients, they immediately say, does it mean that I'm like this? Or does it mean that I'm like that? And many times I have to clarify, no, it doesn't mean you're like this. What it means is that you have difficulty regulating self-esteem in a way that is consistent and doesn't get you in really trouble. However, it still has a very shaming and connotation that is, I'm hoping it will ultimately be removed. And that has to do with the new movement of trying to humanize narcissism and trying to see the person behind the diagnosis and trying to see that the person behind the diagnosis is actually suffering. There is a lot of research today that is pointing out to what we all knew clinically, that people that are suffering from pathological narcissism experience a lot of internal suffering and internal difficulties that are very real. And the way it's getting expressed on the outside may not really match what's happening with the inside. And that's one of the reasons that the definition that we have today of pathological narcissism is actually based on external characteristics. If we look at the symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder, it's only based on external characteristics. Mm-hmm. It's not really based on internal experiences. Almost none of that is based on internal experiences. When in fact we do know that there is a lot of distress, a lot of fluctuations of self-esteem, difficulty relating to other people in a way that feels meaningful. And those are very painful experiences that people are trying to deal with and hide and manage.
Why do you think the DSM has such a focus on the external? I mean, that's a problem to me. I don't know, I'm not a clinician, so it's, but so many of the people now, they are looking at us citizens, us private citizens who are not, specialists or professionals, look at the DSM to try to figure out what's wrong with us. So certainly for those of us out there like that, which are many, more than the clinicians, it's a tremendous disservice because you can't identify yourself in those words.
Right. It's an issue, and it's an issue for two reasons. I think that there is an historical reason that this definition exists, and I think it has to do with the need to incorporate more of a newer research that is coming out, not just about other descriptions and other manifestations of pathological narcissism that also describe not just a grandiose expression of pathological narcissism, but today there is a very well described vulnerable version of and manifestation. We also know that those manifestations coexist. We also have to think about overt versus covert expression of pathological narcissism. That's also important to incorporate. There's a lot of clinical literature about this. However, it's still not in the psychiatric description. And I think it's a matter of time and a matter of advocacy and incorporation of new research to make it part of the official definition. I also think that introduction of dimensional understanding of personality disorders and pathological narcissism makes it more friendly to those definitions and those manifestations. So that's certainly something that is a hopeful development in our field. The other thing is how the public uses the definition of different disorders. I think that that's a very difficult dilemma, because a lot of times people are looking for information about what the disorder is. And the problem is that there is very little friendly and evidence-based information online. A lot of information that is available online is very negative in terms of description what narcissistic personality disorder is. One day I decided to look it up and look what type of books Amazon.com makes it available for people to understand what narcissistic pathology is. And
Snakes in Suits?
How to Kill a Narcissist. That was one of the titles.
What was it?
How to Kill a Narcissist is one of the titles, and other titles don't get any better. A lot of the titles are written from very understandable perspective of people that may have experienced somebody with this disorder in their lives. And this literature has its place, but there is almost no literature that takes a more sympathetic view about the internal experiences, which is something that people start to value and incorporate today. And I think that it's a matter of time for this literature to show up. And I think what happens in absence of such literature, people look at the official description of the disorder in DSM and say, okay, well, this must be the official version. This is the knowledge of that. And, this is really the difficulty with any diagnostic criteria, as we know, because a lot of diagnostic criteria, they're designed to diagnose the disorder. They're not designed to understand the essence of the internal experience. A good example is we diagnose heart attack based on certain physical symptoms, but those physical symptoms do not explain what's happening during the heart attack, and we all know this. So the same thing is true about criteria. So it's important to remember that criteria may be descriptive, and they may help define a certain group of people, and that's the value of those criteria in diagnosing this group of people. However, this is not the essence of the disorder. It's different.
Can you talk about when you have a new client, come to see you, and you suspect they may have a narcissistic personality disorder diagnosis, an NPD diagnosis, what do you say to them? I have heard, read, been told, seen, I don't know if I've seen statistics that psychoeducating people, that in and of itself helps people.
I mean, that's a very valuable approach. The psychoeducation about disorders is a very helpful approach. It certainly was validated in treatment of many psychiatric disorders, including bipolar disorder and depression. And now we also have literature about psychoeducation for people with borderline personality disorder. There's some literature that it could be quite helpful. And the same effort to educate people about presence of narcissistic personality disorder is also starting to develop. And we know today that there is some complexity in how we approach that subject. There is a recommendation in literature today that it's helpful to educate people about their condition, and so it would be really important to explain to people that they have this particular disorder. However, with certain individuals, it has to be taken with a certain sensitivity to who they are and how they're going to take that disclosure, and stay more descriptive. So with some people, I might tell them that I see that you meet criteria for what we call narcissistic personality disorder, and this is why. We can walk through the characteristics of the disorder and explain through their own narrative why this disorder makes sense in explaining their difficulties. With other individuals, it may be more difficult to use the label, and in those cases, I might stay with the explanation of that they have difficulties regulating self-esteem, and those are the manifestations, and this is how this is affecting their daily experience, interpersonal relationships, and how they approach situations, or cognitive style, for example. And so it has to be carefully assessed who is who and who would be more likely to benefit from more direct disclosure of a diagnostic label, and some people might not be. But that seems to be helpful, and a lot of people actually appreciate this. It doesn't catch them by surprise. They say, I know that I'm a narcissist, I know that those are my difficulties, and at the same time, for some people, it could be very shaming, and they feel, are you saying I'm a narcissist? Is that even possible? This is so disastrous, this is terrible that I have this disorder. And that's also where it's important to not just explain the presence of the disorder and explain the personal experience and how it relates to diagnostic criteria and why this can be defined as narcissistic personality. It's also important to provide psychoeducation about the disorder and about the etiological factors and longitudinal course and also available treatments that do exist today. And that's really important.